Welcome everyone to Hear Me Out Podcast and Franc Analysis. My name is Franco, and today I'm joined by a very special guest. He's the host of the show Mi Casa Su Casa and the founder of the MCSC network. He also started the DNC fraud lawsuit along with Jared and Elizabeth Beck. And his name is Niko House, and he is someone who really inspired me to become more active and to pursue a path of informing people. So I know his experiences that he will share with you all today will inspire many of you to also inform others and be active. So thank you so much for being here, Niko. It's really great to have you on. How are you doing?
Hey man, I appreciate it. That was a nice introduction. Hey, look, if my experiences can inspire people to get involved on the ground, start their own channel, start telling their truth, as long as that truth is objective and based in actual truth, then the more the merrier. I love being able to do this. Like I said, before we got on camera, the truth is a lot of what we do requires us to profit based off of people's plight, their angst, their distrust in mainstream media and distrust in these mainstream politicians. And the truth is, what our goal is at the MCSC network is to put ourselves out of business. Hopefully the truth will be widely available for everybody to consume, and everybody will start consuming it the way they should. And I hope that other people are inspired to do the same.
So today we're primarily going to talk about election integrity because this is a very important issue to inform as many people as we can, because how are we going to get any of the stuff that we want done? Like if you're for Medicare for all, if you're for ending regime change wars, if you're for the OFF Act or the Green New Deal, how are you going to get any of that done if you don't live in a real democracy? So before we jump directly into that, we will build our way up first by discussing, Niko, what motivated you to, number one, become an activist, and number two, start your YouTube channel?
So I was involved in politics at a young age, but I actually stepped away because I just got like in high school I stepped away because of all the corruption. I just didn't want to deal with it. And at the time, I actually wasn't able to put my finger on it because I kind of had somebody to shield me away from it. But I experienced a lot of racism because I was in the South, and I didn't know that that's what I was going through because people were able to kind of shroud racism as what they consider to be legitimate critiques, and I didn't even realize at the time that they were all ad hominem. And I just accepted it as truth, and it wasn't until later I found out that no, the people who were talking about you were racist, and that's what they were trying to discourage you from participating. So I got my confidence back after I got to UNC, and a friend of mine felt he trusted me enough to start a pro Bernie Sanders organization at the University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill, Go Tar Heels, and we ended up becoming the largest Bernie organization outside of the campaign in the entire country. We were in the New York Times. Bernie's campaign personally called on us to run his Greensboro rally, the first big rally he had in North Carolina. I had a bunch of features, and so did our organization, and we were then able to connect with the quote unquote adults in the community, where we ended up being in charge of how they maneuvered. So at the student level, we were actually being tasked by the campaign to organize the community, and then because they felt that we did such a good job at the student level, because they felt like we did a good job organizing and managing all the colleges in the states, I actually ended up being the acting state director until literally the last month of the campaign, when they could afford somebody in North Carolina, because I still had finals and I was still a student and I was dying. So I needed some help. Now, it was actually because of that move that I discovered just how problematic internal campaign corruption and election integrity had been. And I was working actually for a gubernatorial campaign for Kenneth Spalding. It's actually the same gentleman who came up with the phrase, if the judge don't quit, you must quit. Or if the glove don't fit, you must quit. Yeah, there you go. For the O.J. Simpson case, he was actually running for governor. Really good guy. Black candidate who actually experienced moles from the inception of his campaign, because he wanted to play the issue the black community was dealing with in North Carolina. He was being kept off the ballot along with a list of other black candidates he was like any pamphlets the Democratic Party was handing out, they were keeping him off of. I experienced a lot of internal corruption and election integrity issues with that gubernatorial campaigns, while simultaneously experiencing internal corruption within Bernie Sanders' campaign. And after an investigation personally that I did, and a lot of stories that were being told to me and the connections that I were making, I ended up putting out a video, mostly because I didn't want to have to take the time to literally email every single organizer and activist in the state. And that video ended up going viral, and it turned out that Bernie Sanders campaign members, volunteers or staffers, and any pro-Bernie politician were experiencing the exact same things that we were experiencing in North Carolina. And so to make a long story short, I linked up with Jared and Elizabeth Lee Beck. They gave me the apparatus to conduct an investigation that we now know as the DNC fraud lawsuit. And this is also the same investigation that directly led to us discovering the Hillary Clinton Victory Fund scandal. And so from then on, I dedicated a good majority of my time to election integrity, overall activism, helping people understand the root causes of the issues that we discuss today and why we can't have a lot of the things that we're discussing today. And as a fun fact, Tulsi Gabbard was actually the first major politician to pick up the phone whenever I call about election integrity, because I didn't know who else to call. One of my friends had her personal number. It's like, if anybody's going to listen, it's going to be Tulsi. So I was like, well, let's try it. She answered the phone, and we talked for an hour. And after an hour-long conversation with a senior in college in 2017, so directly after that election, she introduced the Securing America's Elections Act. So I've been busy, to say the least, and we had a lot of ups and downs to pursue the DNC fraud lawsuit. I actually went homeless. I gave up law school to do what I thought was the right thing to do, because I felt like capitalism had this way of trapping you in a lifestyle. And for Black people and people of color in general, our parents put a lot of pressure on us, and my mom always had what's best in mind, but they put a lot of pressure on us you go to college to get a damn degree and a job. You don't go to college you go to learn, but it's mostly to get a degree and a job, because you have generational poverty to overcome for your family. And when I made that decision, it was one of the hardest decisions I ever made in my life, but I haven't looked back since.
And I applaud you for trusting your intuition, and like you reaching out, and you never know unless you reach out. And that's what you found out, is that the same problems you were seeing in your state was happening in other states. So I really applaud you for doing that, and for also inspiring people like Fiorella Isabel and Pasta, and then you integrated them onto your network. Now we have more voices telling the truth about what's happening in our country. So going to the DNC fraud lawsuit, how did that all get started, and what is the current state of that lawsuit?
So when I was actually on spring break, when Jared and Elizabeth called me into their office to ask me about everything I had experienced during the campaign. And when I had broke everything down to them, much to my surprise, they said, could you do an investigation into this? I was like, I mean, I could, but I don't know where I'm going to do it at. Like, I was literally a senior in college. It's like, well, we'll take care of everything. We just need you to do the hard part, which is the investigation. And it kind of caught me off guard, to be honest with you, because one, to be quite frank, Black men don't get trusted like that. When we're talking about this is something that ended up affecting the conversation going forward for the rest of eternity, honestly, in this country at least. The infamous statement, we can decide the candidate if we wanted to, smoke-filled room in the back, that's from the DNC fraud lawsuit. So I was kind of surprised. It took me back a bit, but they were genuine. And I owe a lot to journalists because they trusted in what I was presenting, and they trusted in my, what my motivations. And with that trust, they gave me an office and they let me go to work. And I was avid about, I was like, we can do something here. I'm like, I know there's a piece missing. And after hours and hours of me and Jared bouncing ideas off of each other, I figured out that the DNC has spent a lot of time, and not just the DNC, the RNC too, but they spend a lot of time talking about how they're this abstract political party, except for they technically are a corporation. They're incorporated. They're a nonprofit incorporation specifically. And the number one way that nonprofit corporations are sued is by defrauding their financiers. They say that they're here for one purpose. They have a charter that declares one thing, and then they do the opposite. And that's what we saw happen with the DNC. So that's how we got it started. Unfortunately, the Supreme Court recently, very recently, like maybe a week or some change ago, had decided that they're not going to allow us to move forward with the appeals process. So, it's sad. It's unfortunate. Unfortunately, it was kind of expected because to understand why the DNC fraud lawsuit is necessary is to also understand that the people who sit on that Supreme Court bench did not get there because of their altruism and their objectivity. They played politics to get to the Supreme Court, which is why those are lifetime appointments and they don't fluctuate. And we're actually the only country the only country in the Western Hemisphere, I should say, that doesn't fluctuate judges based off of terms. But we are also the only country in the Americas that only limits our presidents to 2 terms. That's what's interesting. But then we give presidents unlimited power to select all these executive positions that are permanent positions, which I don't believe is by accident. So like I said, the DNC fraud lawsuit has concluded, but we learned a lot. It is other lawsuits. We saw lawsuits all up and down California and the West Coast after what happened to Bernie in 2016. Hell, some of that stuff is still ongoing. We even saw Jill Stein, who I was a surrogate for, and still to this day, one of my favorite people ever. We saw her get some victories in places like Pennsylvania because she decided to trust her gut, right? She kind of figured something was amiss in the 2016 election, given all these records that she broke on behalf of the Green Party, succeeding the end of Bernie Sanders' campaign. And then in areas where, like Michigan, for example, where the Green Party is actually, I think that's one of their most popular states, there were local candidates getting more votes than Jill Stein was. And I spoke at her Detroit rally where there was about 800 people there. It was ridiculous. So she trusted her instinct. And then she ended up exposing the corruption within that system. And that, combined with what happened with Tim Canova down here in 2016, but then especially in 2018, where he as an independent got less total votes than he did in an election where more people turned out. In a general election, nonetheless. That kind of told me, wow. I know election integrity was a major issue, but now I know election integrity is the issue. There is nothing else more important than election integrity, because no matter what you want to fight for, it is not going to be achieved until we have control over our voices once again.
So it hasn't yet been heard by the Supreme Court, right?
It got reviewed by the Supreme Court, or at least, so technically it got reviewed by the Supreme Court. It's a convoluted process, but it was basically being reviewed by Clarence Thomas, and he would determine whether or not it was able to go back down to the 11th Circuit Appellate Court and be heard again. However, he determined that it was not suitable to go back down to the appellate court. And after much deliberation and consideration, Jared and Liz had decided, because it's expensive, it put their family in danger, it put us in danger. They decided, you know what, we're going to take the victories that we've had so far, and we're going to try to build on that in a different way, but they didn't want to continue to pursue what they felt was kind of a lost cause as far as the legality situation was concerned. It isn't a lost cause by the letter of the law. However, once again, we have to kind of understand the system that we're playing with, and what our victories look a little bit different than somebody who's looking to run for office for the establishment, right? They define their victories by their titles, by their dollars, and things like that. However, our victories look a little bit different. The DNC telling us exactly how they felt about their voters was our victory. So now people can have the choice whether or not to be enslaved by a party who clearly doesn't care about them, right, who doesn't care about their right to vote. And so that actually led to people like Tulsi Gabbard building a name for herself, Tim Canova being even more legitimized in the minds of a lot of people. I feel like a lot of independent journalists have come up from analyzing just the DNC fraud lawsuit and everything surrounding it. And so we got victories in other ways, and they haven't forgotten about that, and we're going to continue to build on that. But as far as the DNC fraud lawsuit itself, it has unfortunately come to an end.
So for people who are interested in looking at more information about that DNC fraud lawsuit, I will have linked in the description an interview that you had with Jared Beck, where it was revealed also how you guys were feeling like your lives were in danger and how you guys were receiving mysterious phone calls and all that. So I will have that linked in the description for people to look at. So let's explain the basics for people, because Donald Trump was getting this confused back in 2016, and many people still get these terms confused. There is election fraud, and then there's voter fraud. So could you explain to people what the difference is?
Yeah, so Donald Trump still gets that wrong. And in fact, when he's actually trying to genuinely call out election fraud, he keeps saying voter fraud. And it's because for some reason that's used as like this all-encompassing term, when that's not the case. Voter fraud specifically is when a voter, under their own duress, decides, I want to just corrupt the outcome of the process in only a way where my vote is counted more or less than it should be, right? If a voter, because if you're a poll worker, generally you're a registered voter. If that voter decides to steal a bunch of ballots on behalf of one candidate, that is not voter fraud. That is election fraud. That is completely different, because you are acting at that point in one capacity or another on behalf of a municipality or a state or the U.S. government or a party. So whenever Trump was referring to the Democrats in California specifically, which, by the way, everybody should check out Pasta and Fiore's video regarding that, because Trump was actually telling the truth. Dead people were actually voting in that election. We have zero idea where those mail-in ballots go, because Pasta tried to follow their chain of command, or their chain of custody. Sorry, military talk. But their chain of custody from start to finish. When he got halfway through there, he was like, where the hell are those ballots going? We don't know. This is the same thing with provisional ballots. And that's why they were handing out so many in California, because those ballots are by definition not counted the night of the election, because they're provisional. And the provision is, we have to ensure that you are correctly registered, which is just an excuse to give people provisional ballots. So voter fraud is when a voter by themselves affects just their vote in one form or another, votes when they shouldn't be voting, et cetera, et cetera. Election fraud is when one person representing an electoral entity, whether it be at the municipality level, local level, state levels, or the federal level, decide to massively affect many votes in a way that could detrimentally affect the outcome in one way or the other for a particular candidate.
So I'm going to read something to you from an article that was published in 2016 on truthout.org by Valerie Collier. And this is going to explain how insecure our electronic voting system currently is, and then feel free to elaborate on anything that is being said here. So she writes that cybersecurity experts and white hackers who have gained access to the machines over the years report that every component of these electronic voting systems are ridiculously vulnerable to fraud. Machines are not safeguarded and sit vulnerable for weeks leading up to an election. The shoddy locks and keys on the machines are easily opened and replaced. Machines can be breached without breaking official security seals. The secret software can be rigged with malicious self-deleting code to steal elections. The rigged code will not be detected by standard security tests. Vote rigging viruses can be spread from one computer through an entire network. The administrative passwords are often easily hacked or missing entirely. One person can access voting systems and others can enter behind them. Last-minute patches to supposedly update software can harbor malicious code. Wireless connections are insecure and aren't always evident. Vulnerable hacking points include voter registration lists, any machines that are linked to the internet, any digital votes results that are transferred wirelessly to central tabulators, and all final vote tallies transferred to the website of secretaries of states. Dozens of technical reports and studies, books, films and videos, articles, investigations, and even congressional whistleblowers' testimony have exposed the depth of this crisis. So for something so sensitive like deciding the future of our country, Niko, in which, people's lives are at stake, depending on who we get into office, you would think that the richest country that the entire world's history has ever seen would have more secure elections. So why is it that we don't have one? Have more?
Because we're the richest country that this entire world has ever seen, and we're oligarchy.
Damn.
There are people who pay to make sure we don't have secure elections, and there are people who are paid, unfortunately, to ignore this clear problem that we have with voter disenfranchisement. And I hate to invoke Bernie's name here because he's done a lot of great work, but I want to be clear about something. Tulsi Gabbard introduced the Securing America's Elections Act in 2017 and then again in 2019. The Securing America's Elections Act used a combination of both open source software where you could detect any change made to that software. Anything. I mean, if somebody changed the letter in their name, somebody could go back and check. That's the good thing about blockchain technology. It never erases anything. It blocks it, and then you can edit, but whatever you did before is still there. You can go back and check. So it was in addition to voter verified, hand counted paper ballots. The voter verified paper ballots are for accuracy. Open source blockchain technology is for, obviously, you want it to be expeditious when you're counting, but also it's for accountability, because I get to see where that code came from if someone tried to hack the elections, if there is some type of disparity between the votes and the machine count. You want there to be a disparity because we need to know who's hacking the elections so we can hold them accountable, because the only time that people are dissuaded from engaging in that type of behavior is when someone is made an example of. That's how, unfortunately, our country works. And when that doesn't happen, we get what we saw happen over 2017 and 2018, which many people have still not discussed outside of the MCSC network, which is nobody noticed that basically every single state that Bernie won, came close to winning, or was a shoo-in for with a lot of delegates, whether we're looking at California, South Carolina, Texas, all the caucus states except for Iowa and Nevada. All those states replaced their hand-counted paper ballots or their hand-counted paper backups with voting machines with proprietary software, so private software that can be accessed by local governments, and got rid of their paper ballots completely. So we look at a place like South Carolina, it looks to be, I cannot say with 100% certainty because I don't have access to the machines, but it looks like what happened to Tim Canova, which is something called fraction magic. In other words, if you paid attention minute by minute, hour by hour to the outcome of the South Carolina elections, you notice that basically no one moved in percentage points outside of 1 or 2 percentage points from the moment the election started to the end of the election, like at all. So if you were at 2%, the most you moved up was 3%, or you went down to 1%. If you were at 20%, the most you moved up was maybe 23%, or you dropped down to 17%. That's what we saw across the board, which never, ever happens when it comes to paper ballots. And of course, in these same exact states, actually even more states, the ones that even have quote unquote voter verified paper backups, what do we see? The exit polling was so off. It was off in a way that even exceeded the margin of error for the polls. 7, 8, 9% in some cases, double the margin of error. And according to the United Nations, that's supposed to trigger a recount, and you're supposed to deregister that election. You have to do it over. At the recount, at the bare minimum, you're supposed to do the election over at the most. And we saw none of that. In fact, we unfortunately didn't even see Bernie challenge those clear discrepancies. And then, while we simultaneously have Bernie not challenging him, the only person that was speaking up for the voters, for their voices, as far as in the context of the presidential candidates, was silenced by those supporters who have seen in the past how Bernie Sanders was treated by the electoral system. Right? So how are we ever going to address this issue unless people are actually talking about it and acknowledge it outside of their personal political or personality bias? Because that's really what we saw, right? We saw a lot of opportunism this election, way more than we saw in 2016. So a lot of people, a lot of Johnny and Jane come latelys. Not Jane because she's amazing, but a lot of people who never made any sacrifices for the movement came and made all the profit from the movement. And that's what we saw, and we are feeling the ramifications of that right now. Because there was no pressure put on Bernie to have a national conversation about election integrity. He never did it. The same reason he was never really forced to address Assange. And because there was no national attention brought to it, Tulsi was kind of, her progression in that department was put on the back burner. Tim Canova's progression in his nonprofit, for Progress for All, that specifically addresses election integrity, put on the back burner because progressives just knew they had it in the bag. But I said from the very beginning, and people got so mad at me when I said it, but it was a fact nonetheless, because if you understand this election system, like the way I do, unfortunately, the way I've been involved in it directly and seen how it screwed people, then you would know Bernie and Tulsi had the exact same chance of winning as long as Bernie wasn't going to address election fraud. Because you can have all the donations in the world. You can have all the polling numbers. You can even win a couple of caucus states. It's not going to matter when the end result can be changed with the push of a button in any respective state that is only using proprietary electoral software.
In addition to those discrepancies that you brought up, there were clear and obvious discrepancies that happened in Iowa in 2020. And not to mention what was revealed in the WikiLeaks files, the emails, and the Podesta emails, the unfair tactics that the DNC was doing towards Bernie Sanders, and he never spoke up about it. And then Tulsi introduces the Securing America's Election Act, and then Bernie, rather than to support Tulsi's act, he supports Amy Klobuchar's faulty election integrity policy,
which is a money grab.
So
Fairfield money grab.
Why do you think he did that?
Because he actually told Chris Hedges he doesn't want to be the next Ralph Nader. He's more concerned about his legacy, and that's it's actually heartbreaking, man. It's heartbreaking. Yeah. And I didn't used to take it so personal before, but at the end of the day, Bernie profited in every way you can imagine off of this movement, off of losing. It's like Maria Sarapovich? Is that the one who was always going against Serena Williams and getting her ass whooped, but she was working with Serena Williams?
I'm not sure, but I know he's gonna get that book deal where he's gonna get millions.
He already made $1 million off of his book deal. That's already happened. He did that book it's called Our Revolution. I think it was done in 2017. That's how he became a millionaire. His name is literally going to be a household name. He will have statues dedicated to him. He will have his place in the history books. But that single mother, from Alabama, who was counting on him to carry them to the promised land, to get her Medicare for all, to fight for her vote to count, because we all knew our votes weren't. Whether they're being stolen by Democrats or Republicans, we know that there is always a likelihood that our vote is not going to count unless someone fights for them. And she was staking her last $5, $6, $7 on Bernie Sanders saving them instead of buying food for her kids. That person's not getting no $1 million book deal. Their story's probably not going to be heard again for another 20 years. And that's what breaks my heart about everything that's taken place, is that people were giving their last dollar, quitting their jobs. I know a friend of mine, now she's actually she started an organization with a lot of other people who kind of came from similar situations, and they're moving forward. But she left her job and took a lot of heat for campaigning for Bernie Sanders by her contemporaries. Obviously, like I said, I went once with the DNC fraud lawsuit. Fiorella Impasta from the Combo Couch. Fiorella quit her job as an actress and a model, and Pasta quit a really, really good management job for a major restaurant in LA. Really good. I mean, they went broke for literally now at this point years, because this movement meant so much to them. And Johnny, their producer, he's in engineering. That's major. That's what he got his degree in. He could be making hundreds of thousands of dollars a year at 23, 24 years old. And he said he came into the fold with Fiorella and Pasta, went to LA to find a job in engineering, felt so compelled to influence and inspired by what they were doing for this movement that he joined them to make sure that they can do it, and started producing their show. There are so many people with stories like that who made sacrifices. Some people are benefiting now, but not everybody is as fortunate as us. Even with the moderate following that we have, most people that started in 2016, the Tulsi Gabbards of the world, how Nina Turner was eventually treated, how Bree was treated. Oh, she's not part of the campaign anymore. She's not on the payroll.
Yeah.
And people forget, Bree was a pro-Jill Stein person in 2016, and she got that job because, and it took a lot of convincing, by the way, for them to get Bree. But that was because of her staying true. So somebody on the campaign understood what that meant, but at the same time, she was later on kind of discarded and pushed to the side because of it. And she's going to be all right now because the movement is firmly behind her. But at the same time, once again, not everybody is as fortunate.
Again, I applaud you. I applaud everyone at the Convo Couch for doing what you guys are doing, because someone has to tell the truth. And someone has to let other people know who know what you guys know, that they're not alone. There's other people that see this, and we all need to unite and spread that message to as many people as we can. That's the only way we're going to get the things that we want done. That's the only way that we'll get a country that's more representative of what the working class people want. So I want to read this part here of the article that ties into what you were saying about how Bernie doesn't want to be Ralph Nader. So the article brings up all of these examples of discrepancies that are happening. And then they say, she writes, given all of the above, the most difficult hurdle in repairing the dysfunction and corruption in our voting system is not designing solutions, and it certainly is improving the problem. The evidence is overwhelming. Instead, the problem is that the press, the political parties, the elections establishment, and even some fleeceed candidates have aligned in a policy of never questioning election results, even or especially when all signs point to criminal fraud. Though candidates like Richard Nixon, Al Gore, John Kerry, and even Bernie Sanders had reasons to call foul and challenge the results of their races, or at least question the processes, they all chose to remain silent and continue their political careers without willingly donning the albatross of sore loser status. The rationale given...
let's not forget about Obama. Obama sued Hillary Clinton, or was about, at least made it known that he was going to sue her, over election integrity, talked about the importance of election integrity, and as soon as he won, and then of course Trump calls out election integrity ahead of the November election in 2016, all of a sudden, we're not a third world country, we don't have election integrity issues, we don't have election fraud, what are you talking about? That's what happens.
Yeah, that's another thing I was going to bring up, is like, there's clear signs of election fraud happening and rigging. And then, I go to these rallies and people are saying things very beautifully, and then all of a sudden they say like, oh, this is why we have to vote, we need to dump Trump. I pass by neighborhoods and I see people putting up signs that are like, this is why we have to vote. We see establishment Democrats saying vote, Barack Obama tweeting out that one word tweet says vote, as if that's going to solve all of our problems that are happening in our country. And as long as we keep having establishment candidates, that's just going to keep making corporations stronger and more powerful. They have more money to fuel these establishment politicians, and they have more money to suppress democracy that way. So
I got a question for you.
Go ahead.
Did you see the Minnesota City Council voted recently to disband and defund the Minnesota PD, or the Minneapolis PD specifically. Do you think that any of them ran on that issue? Do you think any of them made that promise?
No. That's something that happens outside of the electoral process system when you put pressure on them.
Exactly. They felt the pressure from only the national conversation, but they felt that fear from the protests right in their front yard. Yeah. That's how Lyndon B. Johnson, a known racist, didn't even think of challenging the civil rights amendments that were passed by Congress subsequently to JFK's murder, because he knew, I don't give a damn how racist I am. If I don't do well, back then, they had hundreds of thousands of people in D.C. on a regular basis. It's not like it is now. But back then, they literally feared for their lives. They were literally worried that people were going to damn near bulldoze Capitol Hill if they didn't give the people what they wanted. So why is it that we never saw Martin Luther King run for office? Why is it that we never saw Malcolm X run for office? Why was it that they were so intent on pushing those politicians from the outside? Because they knew, as what people should know today, which is that the best movements are not the ones that are specifically centered around getting someone elected, but it's focused, but it's centralized.
Yeah.
You use your influence, your power, your platform, whatever access you have, your network, to get people to push these politicians for their own self-interest, because don't believe they're doing anything altruistically. That'd be a dumb assumption. Oh, I'm going to vote for this person because this is what they promise. Yeah, but when no matter what they promise, the truth is, and it's not even their fault all the time. Not everything they want is going to get passed just because they want to do the right thing. Doing the right thing is almost certainly a way to get excommunicated as far as the process is concerned. What you have to do is, no matter what you promise, you're going to do what the hell I want to. I don't care what party you belong to. Or else we're going to be outside of your office every day until you do.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what we are seeing right now. We just saw, what's his name from New York, get beat.
The guy who AOC beat, I don't remember his name.
No, okay. We saw Engel get beat. Engel got beat by a principal from Westchester because he got caught on camera saying if it wasn't an election year, I wouldn't even be here right now. And of course, he had some other problematic stances too, but that was it. And so people saw, people knew. And his opponent, Jamal Bowman, was prepared. And actually, him and Booker were both prepared to challenge election integrity or election fraud. And Booker actually had to, unfortunately, and McGrath won. And it's because she cheated. And it was the Democrats who helped her cheat, for those of you who might think that it's only limited to Republicans for some weird reason. And because of the outside pressure, that is why the right person got elected. It wasn't even necessarily because they liked Bowman better, but they were definitely like, we don't like this asshole. And that's the important thing. And so they knew that what they would consider to be positive change, which is getting rid of Ingalls, was what they wanted, and people organized to make it happen on the outside. They knew that voting was absolutely the last step in that process to see change. And that's how people should always approach the voting process. Yeah, voting is extremely important, but it isn't important because your vote's necessarily going to count. It's important for accountability. It's important to see the last step, to see if your process is actually counting your voice and taking into account your voice. And when that does not happen, then it is also important for you to follow up and challenge that process for discounting your voice. But those are the last two steps. You need to be out into the streets. You need to be writing your Congress people. You need to be educating yourself and getting that truth out there on social media, to your family members, to your friends. Then you go vote. And then even after that, you go check to make sure your vote counts. And then if that is not happening, you give them hell until it does count.
And all these historical changes that we got in history, like giving women the right to vote, like giving Black people civil rights, getting lower work hours, that wasn't just because we voted for the right president who was just like saying, I feel bad for these people and I'm going to implement these policies. It's because the people who worked outside of the system put pressure on those people to get those changes done. And that's something I told people at the rallies when I was able to speak to them. I said, I'm worried that we're going to stop coming out here if we get Trump unelected. It doesn't matter who's in office.
They already told you that's what they're going to happen. All the signs said it, right? If Hillary was president, we'd be at brunch right now. They told you where they were going to be at.
I was surprised though. I did ask, I was like, because, it doesn't matter who we have in office. We have to keep fighting because who wrote the crime bill? And I was expecting some people to say it, but I was surprised by the number of young people that said Joe Biden. And I saw some people were like, huh? Like there were some like white people and other people were like,
they didn't know.
Yeah, they didn't know. So like,
and, oh man, don't even get me started on that. They don't. There are a lot of people who have no idea just how bad Joe Biden, because a lot of people base their disdain for Trump off of rhetorical blunders. For me and probably for yourself, honestly, if your big pitch is don't vote for the white racist presidential candidate,
which one?
Then we would never have a president if it was up to us. Okay, we would just be living in total. I mean, we do live in anxiety, but it would be even worse. We've already accepted that there are just some people who are racist that are going to be governing the outcome of many decisions in our lives. But we have to take account for ourselves and organize on the outside of that political process. But you're not going to be able to pitch people to get out against the racists for another segregationist. That's not going to look at what happened in 2016. You think that's a coincidence? Black people are like, oh, is this y'all first rodeo? Oh, that's cute. That's cute. Y'all don't think that these racist presidents? Oh, man, y'all so late.
Just read Presidential by Margaret Kimberly. Like for those people who want to inform themselves more about the history of our presidents and how all of them have been racist. And Obama, just look at what he did with police brutality. He compensated so much with the racist system that we have.
Yeah, he did. Oh, man, he boasted. I mean, no, Obama was not rhetorically racist, and he took advantage. He took advantage of the idea that everybody wants to be black until it's time to be black. Mm-hmm. That's a very popular saying that we have in the black community. They take our pop, they use our hip hop influence on their pop culture. They use our dressing styles and their fashion. But if you look at, for example, Kanye West, people think that Kanye West has mental health issues, but it is actually, they didn't evolve out of nowhere. Kanye West said he wanted billionaire or the world's first trillionaire, and people laughed at him and called him selfish, but they never played what he said in the clip before that or after that, because he had his designs for joggers stolen by Louis Vuitton after he spent his own money to educate himself on the fashion industry, on how to design and how to sell his product, how to manufacture his product. He spent his own money and time and effort, because that's what it's all about, right? Pull yourself up by your bootstraps and be accountable. He did that. Louis Vuitton stole his design, and now you see everybody and their mom wearing those joggers now. They're everywhere. He said he wanted to be the world's first trainer. He said, because at the top, we don't have representation. We don't have somebody to step in to make sure that doesn't happen. We don't have somebody to then hire popular black fashion designers, because, we want to be able to sell and pitch to our own people. But at the same time, we want to be acknowledged for our talent like anyone else does, because there's a certain level of clout and therefore influence that comes with that. And that influence and network we can use to then build up our own people. This is not a foreign concept. Everybody does it. Mm-hmm. What Obama did was take what Louis Vuitton did, but as a black man, right? He used the little idiosyncrasies that are very, very well known in the black community. He parlayed with hip hop artists. He acted black, if you will. Yeah. Pretended to empathize with the young black men and women who were being murdered by cops. That resulted in riots like Ferguson, which happened under Obama that nobody wants to talk about. Baltimore riots, which happened under Obama that nobody wants to talk about. Standing Rock, even, with the way the Native American people were treated, which happened under Obama. And while he was pretending to empathize, behind our back, he was giving the police weapons that are they're literally illegal to use on our adversaries during a time of war. And he gave them to our police to use on us.
Yeah. There's an article by the Huffington Post that talks about how Obama and Biden laid the groundworks for Trump, and then for some reason we think that things will get better under Biden, when a lot of those policies that were passed to militarize the police were Biden's pet projects. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I mean, he never, and remember, Biden refused to apologize for the crime bill. Refused. Yeah. To this day, he still refused. What would change under Biden exactly? Do you know what he?
It's the more polite face.
He actually said, "Well, what we need to do is we need to better train the police. So we just need to infuse like $300 million more dollars to police." Isn't that what you said the last time? Isn't that what you said last? I just want to make sure I'm not crazy, right? That's what he said. Oh, if we have more police, then there'll be less crime. No, y'all just found more excuses to arrest people. Then you said, well, we have to train them better. Right? Then he said, and then the Violence Against Women's Act, which The truth is, Bernie lied about. He lied saying that I voted for the bill because of the Violence Against Women's Act. That's not true. If you go back and listen to his interviews, he was very clear. He stood where Biden stood, in the rhetoric that he was using. It's unfortunate, but it's reality. And even the Violence Against Women's Act, do you know what that really was? It was a money grab.
Yeah.
There was somebody who gave a young woman who gave a very impassioned speech at a Tulsi Gabbard rally just about how bad the Violence Against Women's Act is and how much it's actually stood as an obstacle of domestic violence victims. So if we are going to pretend like Biden isn't literally, it's like he's laughing at us at this point. He's like, hey, watch this. Hey, let's give them $300 million more to get them better trained. Watch these motherfuckers still vote for me.
Yeah.
And that's what we see.
I tell these people, and I say this a lot in Big Talk, Little Talk. I'm like, you guys think that incrementalism is going to work? Well, yeah, it's working. Incrementalism is working, but it's not working to favor working class people. We're seeing the incrementalism working for the corporations. So you shouldn't call it incremental progressivism. This is incremental regressivism, because these corporations just keep getting larger and larger by the year. Look at what's happening during this quarantine. All the billionaires just got richer. Yeah. Elon Musk, Jeff Bezos, all of them.
And they are cheap in what they do. I'm glad you called it incremental regressivism, because what they do is they chip at it so slowly that you don't know until that president's time is up, and then you could blame it on the next guy, and then then the same thing happens. Then you get to blame it on the next guy, and the next guy says he'll be different, but he knows that he basically has zero to no control over what's going on. If they do try to challenge anything substantively, they will be reined in, and we've seen what happens. So, I mean, people really don't think about that, but like we said at the beginning of the show, there is a reason that for some reason we're the only country in all of the Americas, people, that has term limits on presidents, but no term limits on judges. But that president can nominate and select lifetime appointments for all the most important positions in this country. When I say important positions, I mean the CIA director, FBI director. Dr. Fauci has been here for 5 administrations, and he's been straight lying to people regarding the availability for solutions for COVID. Not necessarily that COVID is fake, because it's real. One of my friends actually got it, unfortunately, and he actually had it for 2 months. But the thing is, Cuba's already found the miracle drug for it, and it's been working. Notice that Africa, you haven't heard anything about Africa, right? Because Africa's good. Africa is using all the ready-made solutions, and the reason that we don't know about them is because our pharmaceutical industry wants their solution to be the one on the market, because the ones that are already made are already generic brands, or their own, or the patents are owned by other countries. So it's $8 a bottle with your insurance.
And this
is the corruption that we see. But yet our president has term limits, but their appointments, they're corrupt appointments that were influenced by the money that they took to get into damn executive office, are permanent.
And it's like when we get like a Democrat in office or whatever, like they do things like, oh, like we're reinstituting like a better like a plan for when there's another pandemic happening, and then we're gonna go back to the Paris Climate Agreement. But then while they're doing that, they're giving more. They're making the fossil fuel industry more powerful. They're making the insurance industry more powerful, and so then like more accurate scientific articles get suppressed, and then the ones that are funded by these institutions are promoted more.
Absolutely.
And then, this is why it's regressivism. It's incremental regressivism. It's not progressivism. Yeah, we get more like better social policies, but what good is that if we're all going to be like...
And do we really get that? Like, are they really better, or are they just redisguised? They're okay, so people that don't understand how institutional racism works and how prominent it has been, they like to say slavery was 400 years ago. Well, when they got rid of redlining, like in the early 2000s, and even really then, they didn't really get rid of it. It looks different in different areas. Now it looks more similar to gentrification. But for those of you who do not know, redlining is where they disallow black families from owning businesses in specific communities. They were not allowed to take out second mortgages on their houses. If you understand how most people get their businesses, it's by taking out the second mortgage on your house, because 1, it's much cheaper. 2, you already been approved for that loan, and so you don't have to take out another. So a lot of times to start a business, you have to take out like 20%. You have to have that cash on hand, and then you might qualify for the loan. And then if you haven't had enough business experience, you still might not qualify for it. But then, of course, your interest is still going to be higher if you do it through that. But if you take out a second mortgage, your interest rate sometimes stays the same. It might go down a little bit even if you've been doing well on your payments. And it's ultimately cheaper for your business to do the second mortgage. That makes or breaks your ability to start a business, especially in the 80s and the 90s. We were disallowed from doing it. That's what makes it so funny whenever people say, black people are destroying their communities. Whose community? It's not ours. We don't own it. In fact, this is also where the term model minority comes from, because guess what? They were giving those loans then to the Koreans and the white Arab, the Caucasian Arabs, like some Syrians, some Palestinians, etc., in our neighborhoods, on our corners, and telling the same loan that you or I were denied, they were given, and all the profits and networking that comes with that, and the opportunity that comes with having a friend that owns that business in that neighborhood, so that your kid can be employed there for their part-time summer job, and then your kid's kid can be employed there. And they can pass that business down, and that money spreads to the community, very similar to what we once saw in Tulsa, Oklahoma, and Black Wall Street. That was taken away from us, and then specifically they were giving it to another minority and saying, well, we're not racist, what are you talking about?
Yeah.
We're not racist. But there was this very specific determination to ensure black people specifically, who a lot of people would consider to be the white elites in this country, to be their biggest competition, their biggest threat, because we have, and I would say that like Latinos in general, especially the brown and black ones, they have a very similar advantage. We had to learn all your history. We had to learn all your practices. We had to understand you because you made it mandatory. But guess what? I was also raised by my mother, who had a much different experience, who taught me how to navigate this system in a way that you will never understand. I can code switch, and most of my white friends from high school and college could never even hope to try to go to my old neighborhood and talk and even be able to understand. I'm gonna tell you a funny story. Mm-hmm. I remember one time I was talking to my friend. His name is Brandon, so like the most white name you can think of. And he said, I was talking to my Latino friend and my black friend, because we were all mutual friends. And I said something. I wish I could remember what I said. This man looked at me and said, "What did you just say?" And I said it again, and I'm like, thought he was joking, because I just thought he just couldn't hear me. And he was like, "Bro, what the hell does that even mean?" And I'm like, "What? Are you serious?" And then I'm like, "Brandon, how often does this happen?" He's like, "Honestly, it happens more often than I would care to admit, because I don't want to be embarrassed. Because this is actually a thing. Ebonics is a different language. It is actually taught, I think, at the University of Chicago. So this is an advantage. And if you're bilingual, you will now know everything that CEO knows when you go into that job, or that potential CEO or potential VP or potential president or potential manager. You know everything they know, but I know I have my culture, the influences and the struggles and the plight that have molded me because of that, and I'm also bilingual. So all the advantages that we get through our plight, these people are more than aware of. And it's not just about diminishing our finances. It is about diminishing any chance for equitable opportunity, because they've seen what we've done with it, and they don't want to have to deal with it, because then that would make actual capitalism, right? It's supposed to be free market competition. Nah, they don't want competition. Capitalism has become crushing your competition at all costs, not legitimately competing. I love competition, but that's also because I know the environment that I've grown up in as a black man. You gotta love competition, because your competition is going to have every perceived advantage over you in most situations, and you got to be willing to accept that challenge. Most people, even when they don't realize it, have been given the opportunity that they have, not given the job necessarily, right? Not given their acceptance into Ivy League school, but they've been given the opportunity where others have had their opportunity taken away from them.
Yeah, robbed from them. And this isn't taught to us in school about how unfair, our neighborhoods are set up. These schools are funded based on how rich the neighborhood is. And Jimmy,
93%. That's a Jim Crow policy that is still in effect.
It's Jimmy brings up, when he's like ranting about how people don't understand, like when people are shocked by police brutality and people's unconscious racial bias. He's like, "Oh, did you just live in a cul-de-sac your whole life, and that's why you don't understand these things?" So I wanted to, I wanted to bring up like like you mentioned, people that don't talk about election integrity and the obvious election rigging that happened in 2016, or they just like brushed it under the rug. We know who those people are, like, you know, like the Young Turks and those people. This is why it's so important, in order to prevent these unconscious racial biases that happen. We need to have required study abroad programs, and it shouldn't be like people, oh, if you live in New York or if you are well off and then you go study in like London or in like a rich neighborhood there. No, we need to have study abroad programs where you go to a third world country and you understand how their life is, or even like go live in like a poor neighborhood and see how their life is like. And then you bring up,
you can do study abroad right here. Shit.
You bring up like
from Westchester in the South Central LA, boy, they'll learn more there than going abroad.
That will develop, that will progress the country, society so much if we develop a better understanding of why people are mad about these protests. Instead of like looking and criticizing them for rioting, why don't you ask the question why they're rioting and how you can stop that from happening? So
if I got everything I need, my most basic needs fulfilled, why would I risk it all by getting caught on camera selling something that I could sell later?
So you bring up on your show about, you know, the white knight savior complex, and that's a possible reason for why people like on TYT and on the Majority Report failed to cover people like Tulsi Gabbard, who was presenting, if you were to just look at policies, she had the best policies. So
it wasn't even close.
For people who don't know what the white knight savior complex is, could you explain what that is? Because this is an important term that more people need to be aware of.
So the white savior complex, or white knighthood, is
you coined it, right?
So not the white savior complex, but I'm pretty sure I came up with white knight. I've never heard anybody else say it until I came up with it. And it did stem from the concept of the white savior complex, but the white knighthood, I actually came up specifically for progressivism, because these people really feel like they're coming in on this damn white horse with their shining armor, ready to save the world. I'm going to destroy this whole army of racism and oppression by myself. But I need you to pat me on the back and remember, you know, I need my 40 acres after this is done. I need all my praise. I need to be have love thrown on me by the oppressed. Mm-hmm. But just know also, I'm not gonna give anybody else credit whenever the time comes. If one of those oppressed people were one of my generals, you're never gonna know about it. But white knighthood basically is the concept that there are certain figures that have figured out that being on the quote unquote right side of history, at least rhetorically, grants you a certain amount of privilege that is very hard to discern. If you are not, it's very cryptic the way that privilege works in that particular case. But you've seen it over and over again, and you probably don't even know. For example, there is no world in which Nina Turner should not have, more subscribers than AOC. Mm-hmm. How in a movement, especially this election, almost everybody credits Bernie's success directly to Nina. Why is it that AOC gets all the retweets and all the love and all the support? And some people would say, well, no, it's different because she's Puerto Rican, right? Not necessarily, people, because she, I want to say code switches, but like she was raised in a white apparatus, and she is able to kind of assimilate. She has assimilated. And if you knew her history, you understand what I mean. But let's look at somebody like David Sirota even. David Sirota oftentimes came to the defense of AOC and vice versa. Came to the defense of Elizabeth Warren, ? Never, if at all, came to the defense of Nina. Nina, being a black woman unapologetically, experiences and all, has never been ashamed of that. Yeah, she gets a lot of retweets. Yeah, you might think, well, she has like 300, 400,000 subscribers. What's the problem? Nina was literally the engine of Bernie Sanders' campaign, to the point where even Chris Wallace, the one that got fired for saying that stupid sexual harassment, saying the comments about Bernie attracting Nazis or something like that. Like, this dude was like, you're my favorite surrogate ever. You're the best surrogate that. Chris Wallace is saying this about Nina. Mm. And yet, she is not treated as such in the eyes of the populace. Why? Because and she even knows a lot of her validation came because she was behind the white man. She also knows this. If she did what Tulsi Gabbard did, she would have been treated worse than Tulsi Gabbard. Because the biggest problem that people had with Tulsi was, how dare you have the audacity to run in the same race as Bernie Sanders? How dare you? And hell, how dare you have the audacity to be better than him on the issues? How dare you introduce a policy that takes a lot of the problems with Bernie's Medicare for All that he introduced in the Senate and introduce something better? How dare you be brave enough to go on independent media when Bernie would not do such a thing? How dare you expose my bias, my inherent racial bias, my inherent sexism? How dare you? That is how people felt. And people, and even Nina, in one of our conversations offline, expressed, I'm not stupid. I know exactly what they would have did to me if I would have tried to run in the same election as Bernie Sanders. Why? Because we have been conditioned to, it's the same old adage, right? Black people in general have to do twice the work to get half the credit. So it does not change in politics. Nina Turner was credited with being the engine behind Bernie Sanders' campaign, but AOC got a lot of the credit for just a single endorsement when she had nothing to do but gain from it. Nothing. She was never going to lose any support for endorsing Bernie. Everybody expected it for years because of the Justice Democrats. But Nina joined when it wasn't the popular thing to do. Nina joined whenever she knew the entire Congressional Black Caucus would slaughter her because they adhere to the white establishment and the patriarchy to keep their titles and their money flowing in. Nina lost her Senate seat in Ohio to campaign for Bernie. Nina got blocked from introducing Bernie Sanders at the Democratic Convention in 2016, specifically because they did not want anyone to know how Black people truly felt about the policy Bernie Sanders was introducing back then. And unfortunately, most of the things that she went through went in silence, and everybody was talking about her being VP. Why? Not because they knew what policy she supported, but because of who she was backing. And the same reason that people would ever, at the time, Nina has become much more well-versed on foreign policy since. But at the time, if you were looking for a VP, then it would be unquestionably Tulsi Gabbard if you understood what her policies were, how much better she was on foreign policy than Bernie, and what that office requires. VP, basically, over the last 2 terms, they've been delegated all the foreign policy shit while the president just chills in the crib. But they were more infatuated with the white saviorism of Bernie than they actually were with Nina, and they loved Nina because of who she backed, not necessarily because of what she stood for.
Yeah, so unfortunately, YouTube, like people who listen to you and other people who have the same message as you, people on Twitter, unfortunately, that stuff doesn't reflect how informed people are outside of that bubble. So how can we inform more people about things like the problems with our election integrity, things like the white knight savior complex and the unconscious racial bias that people have? What can we do to inform more people?
Well, so for me, I've been trying to, kind of put the onus on myself, because from what I can tell, as far as networks are concerned, I'm the only Black owner of a broadcast network that has any type of influence in leftist politics. And so we've done our best to branch out to other platforms, help other platforms build up where we can finally start having the influence over those messages. Because if anybody knows about our network, we only have 2 white guys. Everybody else is either Black or a person of color. Like, that's it. One of our writers isn't even really in front of the camera like that. So we expand the conversation in a way where people like our organization, like YouTube, can't control it, and those who have kind of created this level of toxicity within YouTube can't control it. And so the way you can do that is by making sure that the journalists of color get credit for what they do. I've seen my journalists get their credit taken from them and regularly. Fiorella is literally responsible for Bernie winning Iowa. People have no idea what she did while she was there. We were literally able to, she found out by going on the ground and doing her investigative journalism, there were 12 precincts with no precinct captains in a lot of large counties in Iowa. And there would have been, we saw rigging even with the precinct captains. Imagine if those precinct captains weren't there and had access to that Bernie Sanders app to report on the corruption that they saw. That was Fiorella. Fiorella and Johnny have been walked all over, had their work taken from them. Hell, and this is where people, Johnny and Fiorella got arrested 2 weeks ago, and if those jails were not filled in California and LA specifically at that time, they would still be in jail today. Johnny was kept longer because he and Fiorella are indigenous Peruvian, and Johnny looks the part, if you catch my drift. And they guess what they did the next day? They were at another protest because this is more personal to them than these people who pontificate from behind their desk about experiences they've never had to deal with, because they feel they will only give platforms to the black people and the people of color who told their narrative, but they will never bring on somebody who has all the experiences that come as a consequence to a lack of awareness from the root causes of the problems that we see in our system. Because we know, and not only do we know, but if we come on and we expose just truly how apathetic people have been, then you will be held to a different standard. And you don't want that. I mean, if you want to see what it looks like to not be taken seriously as a black man, go look at any of my debates. I debated Dr. Ben Burgess, who is he's literally a professor of argumentation and logic at Rutgers. The man looked like, it felt like he went to Twitter to get a bunch of talking points because he thought that was going to be enough. He thought that I was something to be played with, and not to pat myself on the back, except for in this case, I am going to pat myself on the back. When it comes to debate, I am not to be fucked with. I went through hell. I put in work in high school to the point where I spent every damn Saturday of my high school career, except for in the summer where I was at some debate camps, putting in work because I couldn't even speak the goddamn language that was being discussed at these debates. But I knew how important it was, and that's how I rose to the point where I would pretend like I had a legal pad in front of me, like I was going to read from it, and just put it behind my back just to fuck with people because I already had all the points memorized. And granted, Ben doesn't know all that about my life, but if that was Kyle Kalinske, I bet he would have taken it more seriously. I bet Michael Brooks wouldn't be dodging me if I was a Kyle Kalinske, if I was even a Charlie Kirk, if I was Michael Brooks bitched on Twitter at me, complained about one of my talking points. I remember that. And then the moment that somebody was like, then go on the show and debate him, Michael, and it was one of his fans. He was like, oh, this is boring me. Yeah. That is a racist dog whistle. Why? Because that black man is not worth my time as a white man. And I know that in white saviorism, I can get away with dodging debates and no one will ever take it as a slight against my intelligence because of who it's against. But back in the day, imagine if Stephen Douglas ran away from Abraham Lincoln. The only reason we even got the Lincoln-Douglas debate is because at that point, which is rightfully so, if you avoided a challenge for a debate, then you were looked at as a punk ass who had no right to be trying to influence the opinion of anybody. Because you could not stand by your own principles. And it should still be considered true for the day, but white saviors, white knights, white progressives neo-progressives specifically, I should say, have figured, racism is still actually more rampant within the progressive movement than people are willing to admit, because they want to feel, because I can pat myself on the back, put out some milquetoast tweet, some good things are good, bad things are bad, and that will get 3, 4, 5 times as many tweets as a black woman saying the same thing. We've been told them about Biden. We've been talking about police brutality. This isn't new. Yeah. But now everybody wants to come out with some goddamn catchy tweet like that gets them a bunch of tweets. They're not going to get up off their seat. They're not going to get up off their desk. They're not going to do what Fiorella is doing. They're not going to use their privilege in the same way that Pasta does. I can't tell you how many times I had to call Pasta over. Hey, Pasta, come here real quick. We got to handle something. Because I need him there as a white man to make sure things don't go south because of my appearance. Fiorella has to do the same thing and Johnny has to do the same thing. We literally call him over just to stand there. Or we'll have him talk and say what we want to say to see him be taken more seriously in real time. Like me and Fiorella and Johnny laugh about it all the time, but it's a fact. It's what we have to do. Yeah, and it's great that
platforms like YouTube, I know that it's starting to suppress a lot of video, like channels like yours and like mine, but at least it's getting the message across to at least some people. You know, now with Rockfin, there's another place where people can get their news from. Hopefully that grows and overtakes YouTube. But we need to have more conversations like this with as many people as we can.
But I want to say how important that is that you just made that point, because on Rockfin, while we have Jimmy Dore on there, Kim Iverson on there, Mike Cernovich on there, a plethora of other people from Ron Placone, Graham Elwood, left and right. Guess what? My show is the number one most watched political show on there. Convo Couch is the most streamed political show. So whenever the opportunity has been given, the show ran by people of color, dominate. And we were the ones that secured exclusive deals with Rockfin before anyone else did. Because when we had that fair opportunity, that's what we brought to them. We brought value, not only monetary, but within that conversation that we have as well. That's what can happen when you actually give a fair opportunity to people of color.
And then for the viewers out there, you know, tell as many people as you can about the injustices that YouTube does, the injustices that Google and Wikipedia do. There's articles out there. You know, I made a video the other day about Wikipedia and how they were censoring the Gray Zone and Minpress News, even though they never had to retract an article ever.
They're on point, both of them. Absolutely.
Yeah. So, you know, it's important for all of us, and tell your family, even if you're like in a grocery store and if the conversation just happens to come up, tell them like a truth that you feel is necessary for them to hear. And, you know, more collaborations like what we're doing are also important, because there's commentators out there that have their set of fans. If we come onto their show and tell them stuff that they yet don't understand, they start to understand more since they see where you're coming from. And then their viewers start to see where you're coming from. And they're like, oh, okay, I can see why they have these beliefs. So I encourage more collaboration. I encourage more networking, more discussions outside. Go to as many rallies as you can and tell people, you know, keep fighting even if you get rid of Trump, because there's many people out there that believe that just getting rid of Trump is enough. It's not enough. And as far as I know...
Keep getting rid of everybody. If you keep getting them, I bet they'll start to get the message when nobody is good enough.
Like I had somebody.
You get people who run to keep the office. You don't get people who run because they actually care about the issues, because they had no intention on maintaining that office to begin with.
And I'm gonna say something that somebody at one of these rallies said about, you know, police brutality, and when you have these conversations with people, is you have to get comfortable with having uncomfortable conversations. I was posting a lot of stuff like on my Facebook before, like long before I ever like started being more active or making videos. I was posting stuff on my Facebook where my family members and friends are, who were just like, oh, I don't understand how we have Trump, blah, blah, blah. They were like, Hillary should have won. I was nonstop sharing information that I learned from, you know, channels like yours, Niko, and channels like Jimmy Dore's. And like, there's no difference between a Republican and a Democrat as long as they receive money from the same institutions that really control this country. And 3 years later, I received a message from a friend from college who was like, first of all, I want to thank you so much, because I thought that I was doing enough by just voting Democrat. But you've shown me that, you know, there's no difference, Republican or Democrat. So you never know how many people's minds you're gonna pull out of the matrix. The more you have, the more you get comfortable with having uncomfortable conversations. And then
100%. We
could have another conversation about this, Niko, if you're interested in. I remember you talking about, this is for people who are into like spirituality and all that, how we're transitioning away from the age of Pisces and into the age of Aquarius. And that's something that I saw a long time ago too. Like, we're gonna enter the age of Aquarius in like 2140 or something like that. Right now we're in this like transitioning phase.
So there was a report that, because it's so hard to kind of pinpoint it, but they said that we're already entering it, which is interesting when you consider the age of Aquarius is supposed to be the age of awakening, the age of information, the
critical
end
thinking.
of a dogmatic mindset that we've had for the last couple, 1,000 years, quite literally. Or actually, I think it's almost 2,000 now. Funny enough, like I said, the age of the Pisces basically started with Jesus' death, which is like his reported death. But and it's just really interesting that his symbol for a lot of people is a little fish.
Yeah, and then people have that like on the back of their cars. But yeah, like for
it's interesting. But yeah.
Yeah, like for people who are like dismissive of like spirituality and who are like, oh, like I am a scientifically minded person. There's nothing in science that disproves stuff that is taught with spiritual.
It's kind of weird to me that people that they like immediately describe. I'm not claiming to be an expert. I guess what's like a study. I don't know what the study of planets or planetary. No, what is that called? Astrologist? I'm not an expert astrologist. Is that what that would be?
Me either.
Is that what an astrologist is?
But there's some truth.
But there, so like this, it's like this, right? You wake up in the morning, the sun's out. You have an abundance of energy. You're excited. You want to go to the beach. You want to ride your bike. You want to go out and play. You ready to go to work. Whatever. You wake up and it's raining outside. All of a sudden, you don't want to do a damn thing. In fact, hell, there are some people that literally get depressed because they can't live in Seattle or Washington State because of how much it rains there. They can't live in London or England because of how much it rains there. So if it's not raining, it's an overcast. You get like 5 minutes of sun a day. Think about that. But when you're first born, when your DNA is the most malleable that it is ever going to be, and you're getting hit with a very specific amount of energy, a measurable amount of energy, in a way that your DNA will permanently absorb.
Yeah.
And it will permanently affect the outcome of the way. Don't think of people like, oh, well, it's personality, that's stupid. It's not. I'm not saying every decision you want to make is going to be based off of that, but I am saying it will permanently affect the way you process things. And then you will react accordingly to how you process those things. So when you're talking about the age of Aquarius, the way energy hit the planet is different 2,000 years ago than the way that same amount of energy hits the planet, or a different amount of energy, I should say, hits the planet now. And so, of course, because of the way we react to energy when there's a bunch of sun versus when there's no sun, imagine that, but on a scale of 100,000 suns. Of course you would be affected by it. I feel like and honestly, I feel like the science of so astronomy is the word I was looking for. Astrology is what we're talking about.
Yeah.
So I feel like the science of astrology has been dismissed in Western culture, specifically because it could potentially give you an advantage if you do understand how you process things, so you can learn how to take advantage of that, build up for your personality or character flaws, and influence your life in a positive way. People don't know in India, bro. When I tell you they got it down to a science, I mean a mathematical science. The government does not make decisions without consulting an astrologist. It's a thing. And like they don't do anything without consulting an astrologer, which is interesting because like it isn't just like, oh yeah, let's take a guess. No, bro, they got it down to math. It is a major in Indian universities, and many people live by it.
And many, like, this was something that was practiced like thousands of years ago. So they had to have understood something. Like, they didn't have all these distractions that people have now with like social media and all that and TV. They had time to like actually study, the alignments and record certain patterns that are seen. So
exactly. Think about remember how everybody swore up and down that the world was going to end in 2012. That's what everybody thought, right? I mean, the Mayans were not wrong, and the Mayans were masters of the stars. That's how they were able to predict so many events. And honestly, I think the sensationalism of it was kind of co-opted for just because that's what happens. Sensationalism makes money. Everybody thought they was gonna die. People started selling their stocks. It was crazy, right? But where I just told y'all, science astrologists feel that we've just left the age of the Pisces and now we're entering the age of Aquarius. Did the world really not end as we knew it to be in 2012? And now we flash forward 4 years later after that election in 2016, and now you see what happened as a result of Bernie Sanders getting screwed, and you're also seeing a weird transition happen not only in the United States but all over the world simultaneously. Yeah, it got a little bit dark, and it is still there, but there is some positives that have come from it because of how dark it has gotten. People say, you know what, screw them, both of them are lying. Let me figure out what the hell is actually going on. And that is what the age of Aquarius actually entails. Think about the fact that even in the Bible, so the Bible is interesting because I never really take it at value as far as the literal facts, but understand all myths, the only myths that are successful are based in truth. And when you look at it from philosophy, if you look at revelations and what revelation actually means, revelation isn't a bad term. It for some reason got turned into a bad term because of the way that the Bible is portrayed. But a revelation means you've just learned something new. So what did we see happen? We saw a transition of power. We saw backlash, and we actually saw Jesus send disciples to kings and kingdoms and say, you need to stop spending all your money on war and spending on the people, or this is going to be the result. You need to stop spending all your money on the businesses here, start spending on the people, or this is going to be the result. Mm-hmm. You need to stop doing X, Y, and Z, or this is going to be the result. And then the Revelations is also said, oh, guess what happens? 30% of the ocean life, or 1/3 it says in the Bible, of your ocean life is going to be dead, extinct. Guess what happened? We're almost exactly at 1/3 of our ocean life being extinct. It said the earth is going to be scorched. Climate change. It said there's going to be smog to the point where you can't see the sun, pollution, and it said that your crops are going to be poisoned, which is what we're seeing with Monsanto. Yeah. Aren't those circumstances that would make literally anyone with any common sense wake up to how they're being treated by their leaders? It is not an inconceivable concept.
It's because we're taught what to think in school and not how to think. Like, we're not taught how to make discoveries. Instead, we're taught like, oh, this is what you're supposed to know about biology, and then they don't tell you to question and discover things for yourself.
Exactly.
But yeah,
exactly. And you think even Jesus was most likely, bro. Jesus was what most people could coin as a Renaissance man. Mm-hmm. And the reason he was attacked and demonized was for the same reason that every other Renaissance man was attacked and demonized. He was against the status quo. I mean, it wasn't like Jesus was out here doing some crazy. He turned wheat into bread. Oh my God. He used a thing to make bread and turned it into bread. They didn't say the time frame that it took him to do it. They said he did it. And they obviously, to create the luster around Jesus, have to hyperbolize some of his acts. He turned water into wine. What? He took the thing that's required to make wine and made wine with it? Oh, damn, that's crazy. It's scientific feats are always considered miracles until everybody can do them. Mm-hmm. And then because of his great philosophy, because he did one thing that we see happen today, and we know what happens when you do what Jesus did, he challenged the leadership. He says, you are not the kings. This is not status quo. You do not have to be in the house of worship in order to worship, to have spirituality. He challenged that. And remember, you think that 10% to the church is a coincidence? No. Even the church got to get their money. That wasn't a coincidence. He said, no, you can pray outside of the church. Don't even worry about that tithe. Oh, whoa, you mess with my dollar now? You trying to take my crown? You out here, you're showing people I'm not just full of it. Not only do I understand philosophy, but I understand math and science as well. So now people believe in him because math and science obviously was not something that everybody could understand at that point. So it's highly likely that he was simply a Renaissance man with many talents, like many of the Renaissance men, and was persecuted specifically because of the other reasons that Renaissance men were persecuted. They challenged the establishment at that time. Exactly.
And, going back to like astrology, the way societies and personalities are shaped, it's so multivariated that we don't have the technology right now to dismiss it. Like, we have to consider so many variables, the way that societies are shaped and personalities are shaped. So
I think many of those variables are more controlled than what people think.
Mm-hmm.
And everything is categorized. Everything in nature is categorized, can easily be categorized. So the audacity of humans to think that we're any different.
Yeah, like we figured out the easy stuff right now. We figured out how to make airplanes and all that because the variables to make those things are so small and easy to control. But figuring out your personality and what kind of partner you should be with in order to have a successful relationship or marriage, that's harder to determine because you have to consider so many different variables. But yeah, we went from like election integrity to like all this like spirituality, but it's important. It's really important
It's important stuff.
Which is why at the end of your videos you say, like find your balance. And I was going to ask you, a life of activism and informing yourself does bring a lot of stress. So could you tell us how important spirituality is to you and what you mean by find your balance?
So for me, I went from a kind of a churchgoer when I was a kid to not a churchgoer into middle school, and then I actually ended up getting recruited to play soccer for a Korean church. Long story, but it was fun. But through that experience is actually how I gained spirituality. And even though I kind of separated from the religious aspect of it, I saw what positive that spirituality brought into my life, combined, by the way, with being more educated, doing more research, because for some people, for some reason, doing, like, I guess, becoming institutionally educated makes people atheists. But for me, the more I read philosophy, and then I'm like going back to read the Bible, not in the context of I'm trying to use it to guide my life, but I'm trying to understand why this was so effective and how it could be sold at, not just the Bible, but the Torah, which is basically the Old Testament. And then it was so successful that the Muhammad used it to sell Islam. I'm like, what was so good about this that they were able to sell it? So if you read it from the context of a philosophy, from a philosopher's perspective, then you get a whole different lease on what the Bible, the Torah, and the Quran are saying. You also figure out the models of control that are used in those Abrahamic religions, because you also, once again, every single book is representative of the time that it was written in, and the power, whoever was in charge at that time, right? So Abrahamic religions are very patriarchal. Why do you, let's be real, why would every single one of them talk about women covering themselves? Oh, there's so much dignity in this. It's dignity, it's honor. Okay, why don't you cover yourself? Well, it's not the same. It's different, y'all. Chill. Don't be asked questions like that. Because it was written by who? Men.
Yeah.
Of course. Well, that's the only reason that and it's funny because even if you read even deeper, if you look at in the Old Testament, all the negative qualities that are used to describe God are negative stereotypes of how men view women. Emotional, reactionary, vindictive, but then in Jesus, and men would like to see themselves as this, but a lot of us are very close to our mothers, and we have a certain amount of respect that can't even really be explained. And so how do they describe Jesus? Oh, Jesus is a savior. What do you got? Long curly hair, beautiful, compassionate, he's understanding, he walks with the peasants, he challenges that patriarchal authority. I'm like, bro, so y'all going to use all the positive stereotypes of females to describe Jesus, and then all the negative stereotypes to describe the Old Testament guy who had to be redeemed, who gave his son to, like, what? Even the willingness to be sacrificed from the moment you're born is something that people would kind of associate with, like, a maternal instinct to sacrifice yourself for your children, no matter what, in any situation. And so if you actually read things the way they're supposed to be read, it's actually hard for me to be atheist. I'm like, from everything I've seen, nobody actually gives me we're not even original, bro. Like you said, with the plane, we just copy birds. With water faucets, we just copied waterfalls. Like, every light we got from fire. Electricity we got from lightning. Like, bro, camera lenses we got from our eyes lenses in our eyes that were already invented. We're not original. If anything, you should be more curious, like, bro, how do we get this like somebody sat down and put out a perfect mathematical equation for life with very few mess ups. And how the hell did that even happen? And that's what's kind of inconceivable for me, because it already happened. And then we just use whatever model is already available and build upon that, but it's never original. And so I always try to keep using that perspective. I always remember, no matter how much I might have learned, I don't know a damn thing. And so that yearn to continue to learn and grow is how I maintain that balance. And that, like I said, it just came through my spirituality and wanting to learn more the worldly things and also the things that we don't quite understand, but seem to be so influential in a lot of the way we go about our business.
Yeah, informing yourself about the systemic problems that are happening in our world, that's important and all, but you have to maintain yourself in some kind of way so that you can continue to move forward so that you can move across obstacles more easily. So
Absolutely.
give spirituality, for the viewers out there, give spirituality a try if you haven't tried it out yet. Look at how much it'll benefit your life. What's
The
up?
soul has been quantified.
Mhm.
They've found out the soul is a thing and it can be quantified, and everyone has a unique one. And it's because the soul is, I mean, if you know basic science says that everything is energy, is vibrations. Vibration creates the energy. That is really what prayer is. That's why it's actually important.
Law of attraction.
I say prayers out loud. Yeah, law of attraction, bro. You put vibrations into the universe. You don't even have to call them positive or negative. I call them positive or negative, but just objectively speaking, when you say something enough, you actually then convince yourself to focus on it, and then you focus on it, and you start manipulating the outcome in one form or another. People focusing on it, hear you talking about it, they begin to process it and think about it. Their actions and it's a domino effect. Prayer is not stupid. That's what it's funny, because if you see somebody pray for the test the night before, they're not gonna get a good grade. But if you've been praying for the success of your test for the last 2 or 3 weeks, it's been on your mind a lot. So I bet you've been studying a lot for it.
Mm-hmm.
I bet you've been planning your schedule around it. I bet you've been talking about it so much that now you feel like the night before, I don't gotta pray for it. I've already prepared for it. Why? Because vibrations do have to build upon themselves. There is a domino effect. It doesn't just knock down one domino, everything is knocked down. That's not how it works. So it's science that simply has not necessarily been discovered yet, at least in Western science. Yeah. But once again, that's just the ego and the audacity of humanity to believe that we understand everything about the way we process things and how outcomes tend to come about. But we have zero idea. And as long as you are willing to continue to pursue what you don't know, and just tell yourself you don't know, and be willing to say that, which most people are not, then you'll be able to find balance in your life. And honestly, it keeps life exciting.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, definitely. And it helps you recognize, certain biases that you have. Like, for example, like I have certain biases that I haven't fully recognized yet. Like that, my fiance calls me out for. That's something I have to reflect on more. Just like a lot of these, people like on the Young Turks, and I don't mean to pick on them too much, but they have to meditate more on their unconscious racial bias. I would like to see more spirituality implemented as a requirement for schools. That would invest so much in a better society.
Yeah.
But yeah,
if we can teach religion, why can't we teach spirituality? Like, religion is damn near is mythical. Like, it's religion. Cool. So if you're going to teach somebody about something that most of the world doesn't believe in, depending on their culture, right? So you could teach Hinduism, but most of the Western world doesn't believe in that. But it's still important to learn. You could teach Christianity, but most of India or Southeast Asia doesn't believe in Christianity. So that means we don't teach it? No. You can teach all those things, and just the concept of general spirituality that is embraced by basically every culture in one form or the other. I agree with you. I think it would be extremely helpful to embrace. And if you're interested in astrology, go to India. You can major in it. My friend's mom actually wrote a book on it. She's famous for it. So it's a thing. So I got to get up out of here, though, man. It's been an absolute pleasure.
I was just about to close here. To everybody, Niko, thank you so much for being here. I thank you a lot. And to everybody, don't forget to stay informed. And what is it, the thing that you say at the end of your videos, Niko? Always more than anything else?
Always more than anything else, find your balance.
Thanks for watching that segment of Hear Me Out. Don't forget to like, share, subscribe, and hit that notification bell down below so you can get the latest on sports, pop culture, and progressive politics. Stay informed.